personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a special guest on the show, all the way from Canada, Michael Thoreson. He is the founder of KRATE Distributed Information Systems. Welcome.
Hello, Debbie. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. First of all, forgive me that it's taken me so long to invite you on the podcast. You and I have chatted, online. We've had calls. We've done stuff together. And as I looked at my list, I was like, oh my goodness, I forgot to invite Michael. So this is going to be a fun conversation to have with you.
Definitely. We never have a shortage of things to talk about when we get together.
Exactly. Well, your background to me is very fascinating because you're one of the people that I feel like you understand the security side of data and also the privacy side. So you're very well versed in both. And I feel like you're the type of person who can help talk about that gap between those two things. And then also at some point, we're going to talk a little bit about certifications. But before we get to all that, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell me what interested you in being able to move over and distinguish yourself in privacy.
That's a loaded question. Man, I don't have time for the episode or for anything else in the episode. I have a passion for both cybersecurity and for data privacy. But first, I started out the cybersecurity side of things because I always had an interest in technology. So I started out getting certified through CompTIA as A+ IT administrator, Network Plus administrator back in 2006. Early on in developing my career, actually just shortly after high school, I suffered my first identity theft. I had a phone call from a car dealership in another city, but in the same province, congratulating me on the purchase of my vehicle. And I said, no, I haven't been to that city, since I was 9. I can borrow to buy a pizza right now. I'm a student. I'm, taking a systems analyst course. I'm working 2 jobs as it is. This is just, it wasn't me, basically. And then several years after that, there was a second attempt for identity theft. And in there, they weren't as successful because I was, from the first identity theft, kind of spiraled out of control. I had to declare bankruptcy as a defensive measure to stop stuff being charged to my credit account. And when they failed to charge something out of my account with this second identity theft, they thought they would be cheeky and change my name on my credit profile. So I was very motivated to look into how do we improve the protection of data from early onset of my career, which led ultimately to the development of KRATE, where we are evolving how the world creates, consumes, controls, and protects data. And after doing several years on the cybersecurity side of things and developing some technologies in-house, and talking to various experts, I saw a parallel between security and privacy. So I took some training from Jamal at the Privacy Pros Academy, which you have had some previous dealings with. I saw there. I think you were on his podcast at one time, if I'm not mistaken. Realized that the knowledge and the skills transfer from security over to privacy. And so after getting my CIPP-E, I kind of went a little hog wild on certifications and got the CIPP-C, the CIPM, the CIPT, and now I'm an FIP with IAPP. And another parallel is privacy loves its acronyms. Cybersecurity is full of acronyms, and I'm learning privacy is also full of acronyms.
Yeah. I think, I guess there are 2 things happening with privacy and cybersecurity. Well, maybe more than 2 things, but 2 major things. One is that sometimes, depending on the location that you're in, there is a mashup or confusion where people sort of try to lump privacy and cybersecurity together. And that happens a lot in the US, where if they think, like, for example, they think they talk about cybersecurity, they think that privacy is like under that some kind of way, like it's sort of combined together. Where I feel like other jurisdictions, maybe definitely Canada, definitely Europe, they make distinctions between data protection and privacy, right? It's very different based on kind of jurisdiction, but I think, the best way that I could describe cybersecurity, I guess in two ways, is like I think cybersecurity and privacy have a symbiotic relationship. So
Yes.
they're not the same, but they work and play together if you do it right. And then when I try to tell people the difference between privacy and cybersecurity, I use an analogy. So it's like, let's say you have a bank. Maybe this is very fortuitous that we're talking about banking, right? Um, you have a bank, and then the person, like the cybersecurity person, let's say you're in charge of the security of the whole bank. So that's the outside of the bank, that's the inside of the bank, that's kind of what everything that happens in the bank. That's what cybersecurity is. But privacy is about what's in the vault and why it's in there.
Yeah.
So that to me is like the best way to describe it. What are your thoughts about that between cybersecurity and privacy?
I think that's a good analogy. It's it's important to know that there is a delineation or some sort of separation there. However, I feel culturally or in a business culture, anyways, the divide has become more, instead of a logical separation, it's almost becoming a physical separation of where these teams don't really cooperate with each other. So when the security team is doing something to secure something, it may actually be in contrary to the efforts of the privacy team and vice versa, or there's a lack of cohesion. And with that lack of cohesion and security, vulnerability is created without intention or even realizing it, right? So the delineation in tasks and sometimes in scope or perspective is there, but in the end goal, the idea is to protect access to X, right? So the mentality is the same. And so these teams should be able to work more cohesively together. And I also think it's a great benefit too that if the privacy team has some information about, some knowledge of how the security team works, and then vice versa, the security team knows a little bit about privacy and how the privacy team works, holistically, things can work much better.
I've been appointed to a board to advise the Department of Commerce for the Internet of Things and how kind of the U.S. thinks about that, whether that be within government or private industry, or it has to do like privacy and international agreements and all this stuff, type of stuff. And through this analysis, I'm working on like personas. So part of that exercise, what I realized is that even though we have groups that are working on different kind of segments of IoT and different use cases, privacy and cybersecurity are horizontal, meaning that it cuts across all anything you can think about that has data. And I think the way that we construct maybe cyber teams and privacy teams within organizations, they try to do it more vertical, where
Yep.
I'm a silo, you're a silo, you do this, I do that, and it just doesn't work that way. And I think the problem has been that companies have traditionally created those types of vertical
Yep.
groups within organizations, and it just doesn't really work. So I think the challenge is to find a way so that people understand that privacy and cybersecurity probably touch all, every level of your business all the way through from beginning to end from your data story, and try to tackle it in a way where there's visibility in all those areas. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So that that's great. While you're talking about that, I just thought of another analogy that a fellow mentee at the Privacy Pros Academy had shared, where they thought of, you can have security without privacy, but you can't have privacy without security. I think I got that Right. Basically, it was a glass house type of thing, right? Right. You can keep the glass house nice and secure, but you can't keep what's inside private because everybody can see it. Right. So another analogy of how they can work hand in hand. I thought of taking that a little bit further of that, if you increase the privacy by drawing some blinds, right? Now you increase the security because people can't peep in and see you entering the code or whatnot, your security system, right? So it's it's interesting how the more you dive into this, the more they need to be together. And you are correct. It's there are a number of organizations that keep building these silos, right? These departments, you specialize in this, or this person specializes in this, and they keep them on a narrow track. And you can see this in certifications, trying to narrow things down, right? There's in the long run, it's not going to work, in my opinion.
What do you say when you're talking with companies and you see they have this siloed approach? Because I've had this situation too, where I've tried to pretend like, let me put my blinders on and only look at privacy. And I'm like, wait a minute. You all have to do something about this cyber thing. Like it's hindering my ability to help you with other stuff because that isn't being addressed. What are your thoughts?
I usually share with them kind of an extreme story that we see in the news, and I think so much that it's become desensitized, where you can have all this privacy in place in, say, in a database and all these controls and such internally. But if you don't address the cybersecurity side of things from an external or even again from an internal standpoint, like you hear about databases just being pulled off of Amazon S3 or off of web servers or whatnot, right? Because they've got everything. They have a login page you have to go through, but the database is actually being called isn't really behind that login page, right? So it's like having this door that, yeah, you keep things private and you're going to gatekeep people coming in through this door. But if I really want to bypass the line, I'll just go around your door and just grab the database and walk around, right? There's nothing, there's no fortress, there's no walls, there's nothing security wise, no snipers on the towers, to make sure people go through your gate, right?
Right. You bring up a great point here. So I want to deep dive into this one.
Sounds
So
good.
the the thing that you are describing, I think that it is a symptom of something that's been happening for decades within organizations that have been dealing with cyber and data issues.
Yep.
And it's like they pretend like the only path there's one path to do everything, and people aren't going to look the other way. So, like for example, this is a great example. So let's say you have a database, you want to give people access, and you manage the access within the database, but you've not done anything with the permissions outside the database.
Yeah.
So people can go around. They don't have to log in. They just go to the data
Yep.
store where the stuff is and they suck it in. And I think that's one of the big problems that we have with cyber and protecting data, where we've taken that bad behavior and put it into the cloud.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And a kind of an extension of that behavior is also like the people that are managing or planning or designing and architecting these databases or web services and such, when you're doing it in-house or homegrown, and sometimes even when you're using managed services, there's sometimes a disconnect there. But the first part is because they don't understand the tools, they're like, oh, well, let's grab a secure web server. Oh, Apache and it is great. Okay, now what? So, okay, let's install Apache, let's put a website up, and then we think we're all nice and secure. They don't, there's no forethought again further of, do I add in an SSL? Do I add all these extra modules? What do I do to secure the Linux box or the Windows machine I'm using, right? So this goes back to like privacy by design and what you talked about, from beginning to end, right? And applying it to the whole data life cycle, right? Not in applying it more beyond, okay, well, this process, we've applied it in this process, but there's 8 other processes in the data lifecycle that we've never actually addressed. And while I'm not going to address those because that's outside my job scope, right? So yeah, I'm sure you and I can go back and forth about various different things that we've come across. If there's a culture and, I guess more a ethical or moral responsibility on people that is missing because, well, it's not in my job description, right?
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Right. Because if you just do just the top line stuff, right, the basic minimum stuff, there are just so many gaps there. And, I'm a person like me, I can't like ignore that. So I'm like, wait a minute. What about this? What about that?
Yeah.
I would love for you to chat about this is something on your profile. We've talked about it, and I feel the same way. And this is people feel like they have to give up privacy for security and vice versa. And this is a very common thing that we hear people say. And to me, it's like, fingernails on a chalkboard. It totally drives me crazy. To me, they're not the same thing, but a lot of people like to say that they are. So here's an example. A couple years ago, there was a big brouhaha because I think Apple wanted to create this kind of sort of backdoor and being able to scan everyone's photos to see if there were like some illegal activity happening. And the issue was, so they were like, well, let's do this thing so that we can protect people who are at risk for this criminal activity. But at the same time, you're basically making everyone guilty until proven innocent. And my thing is, if you're trying to find a needle in a haystack, why would you create a bigger haystack?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That was very controversial, and I was very much against it, not because I want to stop, the whole idea was to stop child pornography and trafficking of it, which is a very noble cause and certainly not something I want to impede. However, Apple and others that were trying to do it, they didn't release enough details to say, well, who's going to have access to the photos? Is it going to be AI driven? Is it first filtered by AI and then a human later? And the reason these are important is because you also can end up really derailing people's lives that are innocents in this, right? It feels like a big giant dragnet, as you said, guilty until proven innocent. There was a story, actually a few stories of people that during COVID, when they were doing telemedicine or tele visits with their doctor, one gentleman in particular, his young child, had a skin lesion or a rash or whatnot, and so he was sending photos back and forth via Gmail, right, with his doctor and such. This was before the telemedicine apps really became popular, like Medeo and others. And the Google systems flagged it as child pornography and locked down everything, locked down his email, his Google calendars, his Google Drive, and made all of it unavailable. And he had tried to appeal it, and they're just like, well, no, there's nothing we can do about it. And he had to go through courts. And so I'm not saying any system has to be foolproof before being released, but there's real consequences when you're trying to release these tools and they're not thought out on like, okay, well, how do we also protect the people that are innocent, right? This person wasn't trafficking child pornography. He was just trying to get images to the doctor to find out, how do I get rid of this painful rash that my child is suffering with?
exactly. I tell people AI is like a machete, it's not a scalpel, right? So it doesn't do that fine tuning, it doesn't do that thinking, it can do these kind of big, cutoffs, but you're talking about the lives of humans, and there's more to the story than maybe what you see, right? Um, I would love to chat a bit about AI.
Sure.
So I want your thoughts. Everyone's going gaga about Chat GPT and generative AI. What are your thoughts there, and kind of your thoughts about the privacy and cyber implications of that?
They're profound and many. And the easiest way I've tried that I found to sum this up for people is thinking about like electricity, right? And a quote from Bob Proctor when he was talking about electricity, he says, "I don't know how it works, but I know that with electricity, I can, you can cook a man his dinner, but you can also cook the man." And so Chat GPT and this generative AI and all this stuff is very much, there's a lot out there of, oh, I can do this, I can do all these great things, and I can streamline my job and I'm more productive and all this or whatnot. And then there's the dark side of things that people aren't shining a whole lot of light to, but are starting to crop up. Like I think it was Chat GPT 4. Someone published a conversation where ChatGPT more or less spelled out how he would trick a human into passing CAPTCHA and other robot blocking techniques, and actually paying them, and never revealing that they're actually that it's a robot asking this human to do this. So the these frameworks are already, if you ask them, they're already able to rationalize and figure out how to bypass the stuff that we think is in place and is going to prevent, an AI apocalypse, so to speak. So I think we very much underestimate, how much knowledge is at the AI's fingertips. Also with ChatGPT 3, I saw an interesting one where someone asked, "What's 4 + 3?" And ChatGPT said, "Well, 7." And the person responded back with, "Well, my wife says it's 8." And ChatGPT says, "Well, no, I'm fairly certain that it's 7." And then the person responded back with, "Well, my wife is always right." And then ChatGPT comes back all apologetic, saying, "Well, I am a tool in progress or in development, and there are times that I can get things wrong, et cetera, et cetera." So it's with access to all this knowledge, it still has a difficulty with conceptualizing the world in what it can rely on as facts. And mathematics, there's a lot of things that we know to be true and just you cannot dispute. So how does it apply things that are more abstract, that are kind of a mixture of the constant rules, or physical constructs that have a little bit more interpretation? Like, so when you're talking about law, was there an actual real danger? Like, say we get ChatGPT getting opinions on, did a privacy harm occur? Right? There's always this debate of, well, I have video surveillance of something. They're not aware the video is being recorded. The video hasn't been leaked, and such, right? And it's been limited to just the one person reviewing it, right? So has a privacy harm actually happened? And while you can argue both ways, that yes, you're observing my behavior without my knowledge, without my permission, and without anything indicating that I am okay with it or aware of it, right? But some people will say, well, harm happens when the footage is leaked and it's you in the bathroom doing something that most people should not have a privy or purview of seeing, right? So AI is really helpful, but it's also really blurring the lines in how much we can actually trust it. And you've also posted articles and commented on other things of where AI has been used to identify people for crimes, and they can easily prove that they were on the other side of the country, yet they've been convicted and actually served time, and then had to go through the appeal process, which, depending upon which circuit you're in, can be extremely long. And it's yeah, well, it's great. You come out afterwards being vindicated and absolved of the conviction of the crime, but it's still damaging to the person.
Right. I don't know. I used to I used to tell people I didn't believe in the evil robot. But I think I'm changing my mind about that a little bit. Not that the robot is evil, but the problem that I see is that people try to abdicate their human judgment to AI, right? So, AI can help you as a tool. I think it's something that should be, I like to say, is in the passenger seat and the human is in the driver's seat. But I think we have some literal and figurative situations where we're trying to put AI in the driver's seat. And I think that's the danger that we have.
Yeah. The evil robot thing is kind of interesting. Did you ever see the movie I, Robot with Will Smith?
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah. Yeah. So in there was the three rules of Asimov, basically saying that robots, may not harm a human being. Wait, I was just trying to Google the 3 laws we were talking about here. Oh yeah, robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human to come to harm. A robot must obey the orders given by a human except where such would conflict with the first law, and a robot must protect its own existence as long as such that the protection does not conflict with the first and second law. And what I found interesting about iRobot is the master AI controlling all these robots came to the conclusion that humans cannot be entrusted with their own survival, and its way of guaranteeing obedience or compliance with the 3 laws was to lock them all up. and basically control them, right? So that they can't harm themselves, or we can't harm ourselves. So the evil robot thing is interesting in that was that master AI actually evil, or was it actually genuine in wanting to keep the human race safe, and that was the only logical conclusion it could come to?
Yeah. I like to say that's fascinating. You know, robots and AI cannot be wise. Okay.
Yeah.
So wisdom is a human trait
Yep.
that cannot be articulated, in my view, by any type of AI or technology, no matter how smart you try to make it, right? So, an example I give is like, let's say you want to make chicken salad. Okay.
Yeah.
So you ask ChatGPT, oh, give me a recipe for chicken salad. It's like, okay. And then you say, well, I want you to put chocolate chips in it. And it does, it say, okay, I'll put chocolate chips in it. So it doesn't know that chocolate chips don't really go in chicken salad, right? And no one's taught you that, right?
Yeah.
Didn't learn that in school, but you learn that by being human and having wisdom over time. And that's what AI and technology can never do.
Yeah. Or you learn like me, and it's just like, hey, let's just mash some food ingredients together and see what we create. I've
Yeah,
created some meals where my wife is just like, yeah, this is good. Never again.
exactly. Oh wow. What is happening in the world right now that you're looking at that's concerning you?
One, the AI thing, which we've already covered. We've also covered a bit, the growing problem around the separation between privacy and security teams, and conceptualizing how you achieve both at the same time. Actually, now that I'm talking about that, one thing that popped in my head is, in the U.S., it would be from, being Canada and looking from the outside in, it's very easy to see how quickly, like, when there's an event, right, the federal government or a state government will get together and they'll immediately enact something to increase the security of the people in the state, but there's always something that has to be given up, right? Like when the airports added in those biometric scanners, like the X-ray machine, like gone past X-ray, right? And they can see all sorts of stuff. The joke is, if you want to get an X-ray, a colonoscopy, and an MRI all in one, just fly out of the country, come back, and tell your doctor to request the scans from the TSA. But back to your question, what do I see? Reliance on laws and regulations, right? Privacy and security. When one advantage of having this one beating, learning through the school of hard knocks, the security side of things, and on the privacy side, taking some more formal training combined with self-taught teaching, there's a lot of common sense between it, right? And a lot of people are relying on the laws and the regulations. And I see data privacy going down a road similar to what the banking system in the US is right now, right? There's been 3 major closures of banks, and now SVB's banks' parents, SVB Financial, and their other brand arms or whatnot, are going under. And this triggered in me a thought of, we can be compliant as much as we want and just always shoot for that compliance bar, but we're still assuming too much risk, right? We're seeing in finance, and I think we're going to see very quickly here some parallels in the privacy and security side of things, where yes, we're being compliant, but unfortunately, by following the laws, the regulations, and following the regulators' advice and such, it's still too risky. And one way to visualize why that is too risky is cybercrime is now estimated to be costing the global economy $6 trillion US, right? That's 3 times Canada, almost 3 times Canada's GDP. That's also accumulation of the bottom 165 countries out of the 216 countries recognized GDP, right? You want to talk about the US economy, it's about 30% of the US economy gone, right? So basically you could just drop California in the ocean and you'd be roughly the same, right? There's different ways of conceptualizing this, the impact and the cost, and these are just estimates, right? We don't actually understand the full impact long term, right? We were stretching this out. Someone suffers a data breach or data theft today. There's going to be costs that last, for a decade potentially or more. I just recently spoke with someone who, was 15 years before they got everything sorted out, and to where their life was back to some semblance of normality before that. For me, it was about 10 years to correct everything. And it took me a number of years to first figure out how I correct everything, right? So unfortunately, compliance, if that's what you're shooting for, you're still assuming a lot of risk. I would argue that you're not doing your risk assessments and your risk management and your risk mitigations appropriately.
I agree. I think compliance is, it's kind of a skeleton of some sort, right? You got to put some meat on the bones. And then I think there has to be, compliance alone is not going to engender trust, right? Because people think that you should do the basics, right? So you're not going to get like a lollipop or a gold star because like we meet the minimum basic requirements of the basic, the least amount of work we have to do, we do that. Like no one's gonna be happy with that. And I think that if that's kind of if that's the bar that you're looking for, I think you're gonna lose a lot of customers and a lot of trust.
Yeah, and as a benefit for those listening here, if you are stuck in that position of where your hands are tied, you're not empowered, and that compliance isn't enough, and you want to get more stakeholder buy-in, or expand your funding budget or whatever. I had a wonderful opportunity to attend a webinar the other day with Anne Kavukian, and she shared two great stats that summarize a lot of the reports that she said she's been reading over the last 2 years, where 90% of consumers or individuals are concerned about their privacy, right? So it's not, data protection, data privacy, the private information, it's just privacy in general. And 92% are concerned with losing control of their information. Again, not information they want to keep private, or it's not subcategorized. I believe she was very specific in the words that she's using to summarize these. So people are understanding they have digital lives, digital information, right? So if you want to, change the minds of these stakeholders and decision makers, use these stats to show them privacy can be a selling feature. We can now make privacy a revenue generator, a trust builder. It's no longer a cost center like it was 10 or 15 years ago, right?
That's great advice. I think a lot of, I preach that a lot, as you know, about privacy being a benefit. And I think, in my view, Apple moving towards doing things to help people control their privacy with their app transparency. I think it's no coincidence that they've had some of their most profitable quarters ever since they introduced that. So that's something we all need more help with helping ourselves and protecting ourselves. But I think if you put, communicating what people really want in terms of protection and control, I think that really helps move the ball forward. Yeah.
Yes.
I want to chat just briefly on certifications. You and I did a session together about this, and I thought you had really interesting insights. I feel like some people they say, "Hey, I want to get into privacy. I want to get into cybersecurity," and they just take just random certifications, and it may not be a fit. So, talk to me a little bit about how people need to be thinking about, like, what experience do I have? What gaps do I have? How do I make a judgment or a choice in what certifications I need to go after?
Uh, as you know from that previous chat, I was no short of opinions and ideas then, and I have not curated them down at all, but they have altered a bit. So genuinely looking at certifications, people are like, well, I want that 3-day crash course that get my piece of paper certified by some organization that says, yes, I know what I'm talking about, right? And the backlash there with a lot of them is that, well, okay, yeah, you go do this 3-day crash course, you've got this knowledge, but do you know how to operationalize it? Do you remember a week later what it is that you studied in that 3-day crash course, right? How much of it is if you actually ingrained in your thinking processes, right? That's one advantage that, say, education, like degrees and such, can do. However, my issue with degrees, depending upon where you're going, they not only give you knowledge, but they teach you how to think, right? So it sometimes can break people's creative thinking and problem solving, and they come out of with the degree going, okay, this is how we do things because this is how we've always done them for the last 20 years, and this is what's still being taught, and that's this is what the industry wants, right? You're taught what the industry is looking for, and then your last bit is experience, right? I personally have a hard time selling myself and my experience. When some people be the mirror for me and they're like, well, you've done talks with the UN and Interpol, you've done talks abroad in Greece, the University of Nicosia, about data privacy and responsible AI, and you've done things, Michael. Like, come on, speak about these things, right? So, I would say don't look at certifications alone. And if you've missed out on getting a degree, you know, evidence your experience, what it is that you have done. And if you get with the right recruiters, the ones that are not just simply looking for a degree to check a box. Like I saw one, it's supposed to be an entry level GRC role, and they wanted you to have 10 years experience, a CISSP certification, and a 4-year degree in any subject, right? So that would be a bad recruiter to approach. They obviously don't know what it is they want to hire, or what an entry role is, or what these certifications mean, right? And then the other part is there's a fine edge now of where there's more certifications now than there ever have been. And some of them are higher quality than the more well-known ones, but they don't have the reputation or the industry buy-in, right? So it's a fine edge sort of, you might find a course that you feel is more bang for your buck, knowledge and skill wise, but you might be better off getting one that's more recognized, get yourself into a role, into a job, and then go get that one that's more that teaches you more. You get more value out of it as a personal investment in yourself, right? So and then hopefully those better certs will become more recognized and more applicable, and then you can be, hey, I was one of the first people in the first 6 months of this being offered, I recognize its value. So that's a wide response to your certification question.
We're seeing a lot of tech layoffs
Yeah.
in the news. What advice would you give to someone, they've been in tech jobs for a number of years. They're out on the job market now. What types of things would you just recommend to someone who maybe find themselves in a position, what they need to do to kind of upskill?
Well, it's kind of a tricky one to answer, because a part of me is thinking more like an entrepreneur, in that a lot of advisors will tell you that when you're launching a company and you're learning a skill set you need to launch said company or to build your product or do something, they say, earn from your knowledge. And I wish I had embraced this earlier on in my career as a serial entrepreneur. So while you're upskilling, maybe hang out your shingle there as a consultant, or, start a part-time podcast. It can be once every couple of weeks or something like that, right? Build your personal brand. As you build your personal brand and you put stuff out there that can be, recognized and potentially monetized, in terms of, maybe you can offer a short course on something that you learned in your career that would be beneficial to somebody, even if it's like a $50 course and it's like, a 4 or 8 hour thing or whatnot, right? There's certain people that will bite on it, and that's at least money coming in, and now validation of that experience. While you decide, do I want to do this full time, or do I want to go back into the job market? And while you're doing that, you can sometimes figure out what skills are in demand, right? when you're doing podcast episodes and you're doing stuff on LinkedIn and you're posting on social media and you get these responses back, you can see what people are biting on, right? Or what questions get triggered as a result of it. So don't always look at what the employer job ads have out there in terms of what they're looking for. Also look at what industry is looking at by responding to your social media content and putting yourself out there, which I know is much easier said than done. It's something I still struggle with. I comment like crazy, but I post so little.
Yeah.
I'm always commenting on your stuff.
Yeah. Comments are content. So that
They
works.
are.
Yeah.
It does work, but it's. I find people that put themselves out there, like yourself and others, who actually will post like a video or they will post an article. They tend to get more recognition on LinkedIn. Also, I find that the people who are doing that, they end up being much more confident. Um, so which then can transfers into another skill when you're looking for your next job, right? Because if you come in more confidently or whatnot, you might actually be able to score a more senior role than what your knowledge or experience would normally have gotten you, just on its own merit, right? Oh, this guy's confident, he's putting himself out there, he's wanting to learn, he's wanting to grow, right? And you get that right company that wants to build people, that's more attractive to them than you have, all five, you have 5 certs from IAPP and 3 from ISC squared, and you've got your certified or CISA, your auditor cert from Osaka, right? And you've worked at 5 or 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 different big tech companies in the last 10 years, right? It's those skills can be used to make you more attractive to employers that want to build people into the people that they need, not just hire someone off a manufacturing line, throw them in there and hope that they can do the job or manage people.
Wow, you really dropped some knowledge right there. I agree. I highly recommend that people build their own brand. It's never been easier than it is right now to do that. I remember 20 years ago, if you wanted to distinguish yourself, you had to find a publisher who's going to publish a book for you, or you had to get written up in some journal and go through all these hoops. But now you can just, turn on an account, turn on your video, like I said, do a podcast, be on other people's podcasts. That's actually a really good way to get out there without actually doing that work. To distinguish yourself in a way that people get to know you before they even meet you, right? So, most employers, if you're applying for a job, they'll look you up on social media or whatever. So if you have, you put out thoughtful information, you comment, you're out there, that'll definitely give you a leg up, at least make people have a better sense of kind of who you are and what you can do.
Yeah. And another challenge that people face is like, well, who would want to listen to me? Like what is unique about me that someone would want to listen to? Or, there can't be that many people out there that would want to hear what I have to say or how I think or where I believe things should go, or what I believe is to be wrong right now with certain things. And if you just think of it from the point of view that is more people on Earth than I think have existed in all time right now, and population is growing so quickly. Like the birth rate, I think last I looked, was 2 births every second globally. So 20 years ago, there was significantly less population, right? There was also significantly less reach, right? So you're still somewhat restricted geographically in who you could reach, right? So there may be people in Asia that really identify with what it is that you're saying, being a podcaster in Canada or even, South America, right? You can reach a much wider audience. And just from sheer statistics, we have over 7 billion people, right? You find 100 people or something like that, and to initially get started, that's enough for you to start building a brand, right? You always end up starting small, but it's gonna build from there. And people are like, well, how do I get these people to have a few thousand, followers and such? Well, it's repetition and building your brand and learning what they, what they synergize with you, and then also it's really just a reliance on your audience, but word of mouth to just get you out to more people. but yeah, so yeah, so there's that who would want to listen to me, or is there enough people out there to justify my time? And statistically, yeah, there's enough people. um, on the business side of things, right? People are like, I'm sure 20 years ago, no one would have believed that someone can start an online business selling dirt, like literally just, here's a bag of fertilized dirt for you to have, in a pot and with everything, pre-planted and whatnot, and you just give it some water and away you go, right? Like how do you make a business out of just selling dirt? But yeah, there's companies out there now that are just all they do is they sell dirt that's pre-fertilized and everything's ready for this flower that you want to grow and away you are. And off you go. Sorry.
Yeah. I've been very blessed and fortunate with this podcast. Tremendous reach. Something happened recently. I had the uh, Mark Smolik on the show. He is the head general counsel at DHL Supply Chain, and so within less than 24 hours of us doing that podcast, I got a call from someone in Australia. They were talking to me about that episode, and it was just mind blowing to me that someone. First of all, what are you guys doing in Australia? You're listening to Mark or Smolik about privacy. So it was really tremendous. And I think the podcast currently, the reach right now, we're listened to in like 79 countries. And it's amazing, right? We're taking advantage of technology, being able to have that reach that we just could not ever imagine that we have in like 20 years. And I highly recommend that people find a way to, make you should be the CEO of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're recommending that people do, definitely. So if it were the world according to you, Mike, and it we did everything you said, what would be your wish for either privacy, cybersecurity, whether it be technology, human stuff, regulation? What are your thoughts?
Trying to reduce it down to just one. For those that know me, I have no shortage of ideas on how to make things better in various industries and such and streamline. I guess think before you share, think before you post. Like when I was growing up, it was, the teachers and the ads on TV where, don't talk to strangers, don't, get into this person's, van, or, be careful of who you give your address to, and other various things, right? And it's, I was going to be 40 here, this year. And in that feels like a short period of time, we've now transitioned to sharing everything. And we see people doing like home video tours of their home and showing the view from their balconies, and then people are tearing them apart and be like, hey, I figured out exactly where you live. And there's some people that have ended up in the news dead as a result of showing their video, and showing the view from their homes and other various things that you share all this. It's fine. Like share it with friends, share it with family, investigate in the social media platforms that you're on how to lock your page down, right? It's you don't need to share everything with everyone and I think that's largely out of people's need to feel validated or have some sort of value. So I guess if I was to re-sum this up, you are a unique person. You have value. You do not need to share your life, your inner desires, your every thought, every time you clip your toenails. You do not need to tell the world. And in some cases, some of these things, the world's better off not knowing that you're doing these things. But right, we don't need to know everything that's going on behind your closed doors. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah. That's great advice. I'm glad you said that, right? So you definitely went the human side on
Yeah.
privacy. One thing I also say is that when I think about what I share, and I'm, very, I try to make sure that I'm sharing something that will have value in the future, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that you had a ham sandwich this morning is probably not that valuable, right, in the future. So I try to make sure it's something that someone can go back, because I have people go back, say, oh, I listened to this 2 years ago and it really helped me or whatever. So I'm trying to put out things that I think are going to have like long-term value. So if you think about it from that perspective, and then, then the other thing is, you don't want people to use things against you that you said, right? About your personal life and different things like that. So, definitely keep that down. You keep that off of social media. Just, be that with your friends and your family. But, try to make sure that you're putting out what you want to share with people and want them to know about you for the long term.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
Yeah. Toenail clipping. That was a good one.
Trying to come up with something absurd that also was not obscene at the same time and totally tank your show in one sentence.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy we're finally able to do this together. You've given tremendous insights, and I'm sure people really love this episode.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity and your kind words as always.
Thank you. We'll talk soon, for sure.
So, bye.
Okay.